Good morning, everyone. So wonderful to have you all on this unseasonably warm morning between Christmas and New Year's, 46 degrees. I'm sure other parts of the country, they probably think it's cold here, but I was tempted to don shorts this morning and go out for a nice walk. so warm. So, as many of you know, Hoshi Vanessa and I, we went on a trip to France, to Paris in particular, and we were married. She made an honest man of me. Yeah? The trip was courtesy of a generous donor, but the culmination and the event were due to a lot of difficult practice, challenging practice. And so we're going to begin sharing some photos of this trip, and looking at the photos, I think you're all going to notice some magic. We certainly felt the magic when we were there. Yeah? It's the magic that we want to cultivate in our lives, the things that we want to cling to. It's what we want for our relationships. It's what we want in our daily walk. Yeah? But if you look deeper, there's a lot more in these photos that meets the eye. This is a difficult talk in a lot of ways to give, because it tends to bring forward some things we'd like to forget. But when we forget, right, our practice is out of balance. Yeah. It's important for us to keep everything in front of us, the things that we call past and the hopes that we call future, yeah, so that we stay grounded. Yeah. Many, many moons ago, as you all know, I had an affair. Yeah. And worse yet, it was with a Sangha member. There was a tremendous pain that was created as a result of my actions. And I'm still very deeply sorry. There's not a day that goes by when I don't reflect on it. As those of you who were here at the time knew, I drew a lot of public condemnation. And of course, Hoshi Vanessa was in agony. And I found myself very quickly in a place I didn't want to be. A place that I think none of us would want to be. So we wound up triggering the clauses in our organizational constitution that are designed to work with issues of this kind when the abbot takes a misstep. And Roshi Diane Martin, who's now our honorary founder and my teacher, came forward as a custodial abbot, and her Sangha began outreach to affected members of our Sangha. Many folks stayed, and stayed with a lot of ardor and vigor. Some left. Some didn't find new Dharma homes, much to my sadness. And at the time, I made a tour of the whole town, explaining to other members of the clergy. I visited 5 other houses of worship and sat down with other teachers and priests there. And I went to City Hall and talked to civic leaders. And I let everybody know what had happened. As you can imagine, I was famous very quickly, but not in a way that we often dream about. Yeah. I had to tell the same conversation over and over, sometimes many times per day, reiterating my actions and my contrition, but also talking about how we intended to practice and work with it. And so Roshi Diane, at the time, began an arduous process of psychotherapy with me that spanned, without hyperbole, hundreds of hours looking into this, looking into the event, the things that led up to it, the deeply held beliefs that went awry and caused me to take a false step. Yeah. She worked with Vanessa in a similar way, and there was a moment when I wondered if this was all hopeless. Yeah. If it was time to throw in the towel and just admit that I had stepped too far from the path. I started to despair, and sometimes even was challenged with doubt about the path that was set before me. Dōgen writes, even at a stage where it would seem that you've taken a false step, this condition will be a state of being. Further, should you just leave the matter at this, your condition will still constitute a persistence of a time being, or which will include both a before and an after to having taken a false step. Dealing with thoughts and things while they persist is like a fish darting a barbed hook, running freely through the water. It is indeed what being here just for the time being, what being Uji is all about. So do not be upset over what is not, and do not be pressured by what is. And these words, to a large extent, remind us that mistakes, missteps, they're not deviations from the path, they're the path itself. Even when we falter, this is a part of our practice. When we understand this, our relationship with mistakes transforms. Instead of viewing them through the lens of shame and regret, we can see them as opportunities for growth and awakening by just opening the Dharma gate that presents itself. They're perfect expressions of the moment. They're ripe for learning. They're ripe for actualization. This isn't to say that we should revel in making mistakes. Far from it. Each moment, we're presented with a brand new opportunity for awakening. Squandering that would be just like squandering your inheritance, Dōgen says. But it's not easy to walk through that gate sometimes. And it certainly isn't pie in the sky. It won't take your problems away. The further you push your problems away, you're going to find the larger they loom over you. Yeah. The avoidance gives them the power of growth, the power of other, the ability to see them as an obstacle. But when you pull them in closer, so close that you transcend them, you can work with them to transform them, but not with the intention of changing or eliminating them, just working with them as they are. Then the alchemy happens, the magic happens, and you'll find that planting seeds of sorrow deliberately can reap a harvest of joy. There's a case in the Mumonkan, it's called Joshu's Wash Your Bowls. In it, a monk asked Joshu with all earnestness, I've just entered this monastery. I beg you, master, give me instructions. Joshu asks, have you eaten your rice gruel yet? The monk answered, well, yes, I have. Joshu then says, then wash your bowls. And at this, the monk attained some realization. It seems too simple, right? But this is the magic. There's a backstory to that case. We think of it as just some monk, who finds himself in the circumstances of a monastery who's seeking the truth. But there's so much that came before it. A monk knocking on a temple gate in medieval Japan, particularly Joshu's temple gate, is going to be turned away, sometimes many times. He has to prove his ardor to want to pass through that gate. And even when eventually that gate is opened, he's placed in a room much smaller than the room we're sitting in here, on his knees, fed 1 meal a day. If he falls over, he's back out again. Yeah? He has to continue to show his mettle. And then once he eventually does make it past both of those gates, and he makes it into the practice community as a whole, he's issued an instructor, probably an heir of Joshu's, to work with. And his training begins with following the forms. Yeah? This is the way you sit. This is the way you eat. This is the way you sleep. This is the way you wipe your bottom. And again, I'm not exaggerating. They go to that level of granularity. And so the monk believes he's seeking some great matter, something far above all these mundane things he's being asked to do. And so he confronts Joshu in the dining hall of all places, where there's absolute silence demanded. And when Joshu's departing, he would depart first. You can imagine he stood up and had the gall to walk over and stand in front of Joshu and break all protocol. I've just entered this monastery. Please, give me some instruction. He's looked past all the instruction that's been presented to him. All the hardship he's already seen and endured. And he's asking for something else, something ethereal, somewhere above the plane of this existence. And Joshu has mercy on him, asking first, have you eaten your rice gruel yet? Some people scorn and say, this isn't out of some personal concern for the monk, but I disagree. I think he actually is concerned. Hey, are you eating at least? Before we have a conversation. You taking care of yourself at least in that basic way? The monk says yes. He says, okay. Well, it would seem to me what's set before you right now is to wash your bowl. And at this, the monk attains some realization. Sometimes the table that's set before us is sumptuous. Thanksgiving and Christmas. I hope you had encountered that, yeah? All the things we'd love to eat, all the things we want, right in front of us. And we revel in the eating portion of the meal. But then, the dishes, yes? And we say, well, the dishes are something, just a part of the thing we have to skip over and get through. If you do that, you're going to get very sick because you're going to have some very dirty dishes. Doing the dishes is just as important as eating the meals, perhaps more. And in that, we find our true awakening. Don't be afraid of the plate that's been set before you. Just eat, and then wash your bowls. This is it. It's funny, Mumon's commentary about this case sums it all up. He says, Joshu, in opening his mouth, showed his gallbladder and revealed his heart and liver. He cut right to the heart of the matter. There was nothing that was hidden from this monk. He gave him the whole practice in its entirety. But if the monk hearing it didn't really grasp the fact, then he would mistake a bell for a pot. He would mistake a bell for a pot. Isn't that what we do often? Circumstances turn challenging, and we see it as something horrible. Not seeing the opportunity for awakening that's present in all of these actions. This is it. You're going to find it here. So when you look at these pictures of us walking the streets of Paris, and you can see the beauty and charm there. And it's important that we see everything that is there. Yeah. Far from diminishing value, you can see all the loving care that Roshi Diane had for this Sangha there. All the grace, all the character, all the determination of Hoshi Vanessa. The long nights that she sat trying to work with the struggle that was put before her by no choice of her own. But you can also see all the love and devotion from the Sangha there too. All of the people who saw this as an opportunity to practice and didn't quit. Yeah. And I hope that you can see in it as well a human being deeply moved by the compassionate way that emerged when he tripped. It didn't take me around the suffering, I can promise you that, but it actually wound up taking me through it. And in that, it transformed the situation, and it transformed this humble Zen teacher